Hey guys, welcome to another video. Today I wanted to talk to you guys about the very first and only time that I played against Grandmaster Magnus Carlsen. It was not in a classical game. Unfortunately, Magnus is kind of a hard guy to book time with in classical chess, especially for a guy at my elo at the time. He mostly plays the top level events and the few tournaments in the world where you can really get a game against Magnus as a lower rated player or lower rated grandmaster, international master tend to be the Olympiad, World Cup, and these sort of events. He doesn't really play open tournaments. But he did participate in chess.com's Pro Chess League. He played for Norway. I was representing the team. Actually, at the time, it was the Montreal chessbrahs, not the Canada chessbrahs. And we played against Norway. And there you go. I was matched up against Magnus Carlsen because everybody on the Montreal chessbrah team played everybody on the Norway team. So it wasn't like board one plays board one. I was actually the last board on our team, and I played against Magnus. So this was a pretty big moment for me because at the time, as you can see on the screen, I was just a lowly international master. This was in 2017. So I was 24-36 elo, and I had not even made the beard bet for GM yet. So that did happen in 2017, but it happened a month later in March. This was February 2017. So this predated even my real push for the GM title. Who knows? Maybe this even gave me a kickstart. But this game is 15 minutes with 2 seconds increment. So it is a rapid game, and it's quite a serious time control, I think. Like, it's definitely a time control where if I'm playing a guy like Magnus Carlsen, I definitely expect his best. He might mess around a little bit, but if I'm able to score a result other than a loss, I'm going to be pretty thrilled and pretty proud of myself. So I wanted to show you guys what happened in the only game that I've played against the world champion, and he was the world champion at the time. He was rated 2857, pretty impressive rating. And I was an IM at the time, so definitely knew going in that this was going to be, I was going to have my work cut out for me. But let's take a look at the game. Magnus started with d4, which is the move that I like to play. Decided to go for knight f6. None of that undefeated opening stuff. I figured I'd give it a rest since it's the world champion. That's the only reason. Knight f3, e6, and I generally go for this this Nimzo setup. If c4, I'm ready to either play like a bogo with bishop b4 check, or after c4, I might play b6 and go for a queen's Indian, maybe with some bishop a6 stuff. So that's what I was ready to do, but he goes bishop g5, and at the time, Magnus was playing things like the London system. He was playing things like the Trumpovsky, the Coley, like all these sorts of very chill systems with 1d4. So he goes bishop g5, basically just avoiding theory. He wants to get a game, and I decide, which is normal when you have this e6 idea, to put my bishop over here because you've already blocked the bishop on this diagonal. So I decided to develop my bishop on the queen side, fianchetto. e3, bishop e7, bishop d3. So honestly, pretty normal stuff so far. It's kind of like a London system structure for white, except the bishop is a little more extended. c3, bishop e7, and castles. And after castling, I actually felt pretty good here because I thought that he might go knight bd2. And when he castled, I thought that playing knight e4 was going to be very good for me because, surprise, surprise, I wanted to trade pieces with Magnus. I wanted to trade pieces until there were no pieces left, and I shake his hand as they draw. So I went knight e4, and I know that if the knight's ever going to develop to d2, I've got that piece to trade. I know that he doesn't want to trade his bishop away for my knight on e4. There's no way. That bishop on d3 is so strong. And the other good thing is that these bishops now are attacking one another, and bishop g3 is not an option without losing the bishop pair. So I knew that I would get another exchange on e7, which helps my queen develop. There we go, knight d2, and it takes. And he took with the knight because if the queen takes, there would be bishop takes f3 to consider. I'm not sure I would even necessarily play that, but it has to be considered because it is double, a pair of double pawns around your king side. So he takes with the knight, and decide to get castled. And here I was pretty happy with the opening. I got 2 pieces traded off. I've got a great bishop on the long diagonal. I've got h6 in for my habits. And I'm ready to play knight c6. And I feel like I'm developing very comfortably here. So he goes queen e2. I go d6 because I actually decided I wanted to play knight d7 and maybe to f6 with better control over e4. Felt like that would be a critical square. Rook d1, knight d7. And now he plays the move e4. I mean, it's only logical, takes the center. But here I was, I was comfortable with playing my rook over to a potential open file and using this knight to watch over the h7 square. Now, the h7 square is like often a square where if these, if the queen and bishop somehow line up against it, it can be pretty annoying, especially if there's a pawn on e5, it stops knight f6. But since I had knight f8, in reserve, I felt like I could take and use the open file here. So in hindsight, one of the first things that I would maybe criticize myself for is not using my other rook to go to c8. It doesn't feel like a very big deal, but this is something you get more used to, as you improve at the higher levels, because I think that the B and A files have a little bit more to play for than the E and D files here. So I would actually use this so that if need be, I could play queen d8 afterwards, and my rooks would still be connected. If I play this move and I ever want to play queen d8 to c7 to get on the open file, when I play queen d8, there's going to be a brief moment where my rooks are not connected. They're not touching one another, protecting one another. So it's a small thing, not really a big deal, but just something I'm noticing, as I analyze the game afterwards. f3, so he's going for, a very strong formation against the fianchettoed bishop, really powerful, and I decided to go immediately for d5. Now, the reason I did this is because the knight can no longer go to f3, and I know that this pawn structure is, well, there's no point in having a bishop there anyway. So what I did was I played d5, expecting the move e5, and I followed up with the move queen b4. And we can take a pause here and sort of take stock of the position. I mean, I've got a bishop that's locked up compared to his, which is really, really strong on d3. I'm attacking 2 pawns with my last move. So there's, a finite number of moves that Magnus has in store here. You guys maybe can see what he's planning, but knight b3 is one of the only moves that defends both pawns at once. So that's what he's intending. And essentially, he would just like to trade to an endgame, because in an endgame with these bishops on the board, my opponent's pawns are going to find themselves on dark squares, and mine are going to find themselves on light squares. And that's really going to benefit white's position. You have light squared bishops. If both of you have light squared bishops, whoever has the pawns on the opposite color of their bishop is going to be happier. It means that I can't target them, and it also means that they're not obstructing the path of his bishop. So knight b3 was played, a5, and here I want to dislodge the knight and take this pawn with check. We can see the evaluation bar has been, pretty much around even the entire time. Queen d2, decide to take this queen. I've still got a4 as an idea. Knight takes d2, and here I was very happy with the move knight b8. I don't have any future for that knight on f6, c5, anything like that. f8 doesn't go anywhere. So what I want to do is I want to get rid of those bishops, which is what I was just talking about, how white has the advantage in a bishop endgame because of the pawn structure. I want to get rid of them. I want to play bishop a6, and I want to play knight endgame instead. I've already got control of the open file, so I was feeling really good about this move with bishop to a6 happening next. Knight b1, so he's doing a very similar reroute to me, but bishop a6 cannot be stopped. He's pretty much forced to exchange, and I've got the knight coming in. I've got the rooks ready to double. So this is where, although the evaluation is around equal, I mean, what was my goal from the very start? I'm playing the world champion. Let me trade pieces with him. I was very happy to have this position. Very happy. Knight c3, rook c4. So I'm just attacking a center pawn while, giving myself room to double here. King f2, knight b4, and I'm threatening knight c2, which is a nice little fork. Hits the rook in the corner, hits the pawn on d4. Rook d2 to cover. And knight c6. So here, knight b5 is the main way to defend this pawn. And I was pretty happy with this position. There's one move that, looking back on, I maybe wish I considered a little bit more. Rook to b4 would definitely be that move. And I wasn't I wasn't sure when I analyzed the game afterwards, even now, like many years afterwards, why I didn't play this move, because it hits the knight, and if the knight moves, seemingly I take this d pawn, and that should be very good for me. If white goes something like rook c1 to hit this knight, rook takes b5, understandably there's rook takes c6. But there's also things like knight takes e5, right? And then black just takes the knight next and is up a clean pawn. So there's no way I would be scared of something like that. White playing the move a4 makes the most sense. Guards the knight, means that this pawn stays protected. But after a4, suddenly there's two pawns that both rooks have to stay protecting the rest of the game along with the knight. So it's kind of like my knight and rook on c6 and b4 are tying down all of white's pieces. And I think this is something I should be very okay with. And now maybe I can expand on the king side and play f6 or something. This is the type of position where it's hard to find white's next move because, it's hard to freeze pieces. So, rook c8, just as an idea, one of the things I was concerned about was something like this, where he can sort of do a perpetual almost and stop me from getting to the open file. Because if I go something like rook c7, then actually after rook here and rook here, maybe I even lose the game. So it's easy to have these hallucinations when you're playing a 15-minute game against Magnus. I didn't play rook b4. In the end, I played a4. I still think this is a great move. I was happy with it. Stops a4 from white to protect the knight. And now I'm really threatening rook b4. So that was my idea with a4, just to stop white from going there. Rook d1, because now without a4, this knight, after it gets dislodged, needs to move. Knight a5. Again, I was happy with this move. I do have the idea that maybe I want to double the rooks, but for now, knight d6 is a strong reply. This move also stops b3. It's knight a5 move. And, I still have this rook b4 idea. So knight d6. And here is coming up to, I want to get my knight into c4. Knight d6, I go rook back. I cannot use the c8 square, which is very annoying. But what I'm planning to do is go knight c4, dislodge this knight, and then double up. Rook d3, maybe intending rook c3, but to me, I saw knight c4, and I was very, very happy. Rook c3 by Magnus, and I think this is probably one of my prouder moves of this game that I played against him. I played the move a3, and if you just take a moment to kind of appreciate this move or what it does, basically if white takes on a3, then the rook's no longer protected. Why does that matter? Well, it allows black to play a move like knight takes e5, for example. Right, the rook's now being attacked, so you can't take the knight, and if you take the rook, then I can take back. I have rook a8 coming to collect these weak pawns, and this pawn is still under attack. So I evaluated this as very, very good. The same thing happens after b3. Takes. And black's knight's going to go here, also taking. At this point, this is just dead loss because white hasn't even taken the pawn in this line. It's the exact same thing. So if white cannot play either of these moves, well then, the most logical move is knight takes knight. Because now, if I take back either way, Magnus is just going to pick off the a pawn, and my move a3 is not so special. But the thing which I had calculated, and he doubtlessly saw this as well, there's just nothing he could do about it at the time. So I play a takes b2. And this is kind of a nice move because, again, the rook is no longer protected now after I take. The knight becomes pinned to the rook and can't move. And it could have moved if the rook was protected, but that's exactly what a takes b2 does. It undermines the rook, means this knight stays pinned, and I'll be able to attack it and capture it. So after rook b1, now I can play the move b5. Again, I'm not in a rush to take this knight because I know it's pinned. After rook takes b2, pawn takes c4. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to tell you that black's better here. I got a protected pass pawn. This pawn is, it's an outside pass pawn, but it is going to be weak. It's easy to target. And at some point, maybe f6, maybe g5, bring my king up. I can target this pawn chain if I want to. But this pawn chain with a protected pass pawn here, so strong, definitely means black has the advantage. You can see it reflected by the engine there. Not quite a winning advantage or anything decisive, but certainly something substantial. a4 played, rook a8, just going to attack that, rook a3, and here I made maybe a surprising decision. You know, I look back on this and I think I would never have done this if I wasn't playing Grandmaster Magnus Carlsen. And later on, I think it might have been later on that year, Magnus and I ran into each other at the Isle of Man tournament, and he very jokingly, gave me some crap about this because he was like, dude, you played a great game, but what the hell is C3? Like, this is just low energy, you know? C3 is just like, that's a move that says, hey, I want to draw, right? I'm giving away my pawn, and when he chases it down and captures it, I'm going to take his pawn, and it's just going to be equal game, and we're going to draw. So Magnus was rightfully giving me some flack for playing a very, very low energy move, just looking for a draw, and I deserve that. So it's a fun little story for you. But what did I want to do? I wanted to secure a draw. Not only for the match, we were playing a Pro Chess League match, but I mean, just the rating mismatch. Like, obviously a draw is a great result. So there you go. I was a little too focused on the rating, who I was playing, a little psyched out, definitely nervous, for sure. I was a little bit lower on time than him the whole game. And when I got to this position, I thought, okay, I got my draw. But he's the world champion, and he just always finds a way to be tricky. So what did I get? I got a position like this where I thought after f6, I was being very clever. Pawn takes, maybe I play e5 later, takes, and I have a protected, or not a protected pass pawn, but just a pass pawn. It can't be bad. Maybe I should have played king g6 in hindsight, to try to bring my king off the 7th rank before I played that. But I don't think it would have mattered. What's actually really crazy is that in these positions, if white just waits, for example, if I play f6, it's kind of remarkable, but the move rook b3, hanging a pawn, and then another pawn would be hanging, always holds things together for white. And I didn't see this resource. Magnus saw it immediately. Like, he saw it probably ahead of this endgame, or he knew it. The idea is rook b6, hitting this pawn. Now, if I go defend it, he's going to check me. If I go back, I'm losing this pawn and maybe more. So I have to go back up, and then rook e7. And the annoying thing is, I have to take this pawn. I'm losing this guy for sure. And then it comes with check, and this guy gets picked up. So I'll show you what happened in the actual game, because it's pretty much the exact same thing. I played f6, and he played rook b2, and just such an astonishing move to face, especially when the time is ticking down. And rook e7, and I mean, this just caught me by surprise. All of a sudden, I'm losing both pawns. I did get my pass pawn I wanted, but my king, as you can see, gets cut off in a way that I didn't want. So this is how the endgame goes. He plays h4, and I made a decision here not to take it. Maybe I should have, but I made a decision to just sit here in this position and try to hold the draw. So it's crazy, like, what Magnus can do to you. I have an amazing position with a protected pass pawn, and my brain tells me, yeah, let's get rid of that pawn, trade with his outside pass pawn, and we'll make a draw. And then it goes from, yeah, I have a better position, to, yeah, we're making a draw, to, yeah, I think I'm making a draw. And that's where this part gets a little scary. So he starts pressuring me here. He's giving me some checks. He's cutting me off on the back rank. I'm cutting him off as well. So basically here I'm just shuffling. And then he finds a way to do this, where I wasn't exactly sure what I was supposed to do anymore. Probably I should just keep his king cut off here on the, leaving my rook on the 2nd rank. But I decided to go d4. So then he says to himself, okay, I'm going to, zigzag my rook and get the exact same position again. And if he has to play d3 and I do it, one more time, he doesn't have another move. And just small things like that can sometimes, I don't know, like they can certainly throw me off. Also, if d3 happens, white can play f4. Again, these aren't real concerns for losing the game or anything like that, but it's so easy to see ghosts and think that you're missing something when you're playing someone as strong as Magnus. So I finally decide to go here instead of pushing my pawn. He goes rook f6, I go back, and he decides to go f4. So in the past, when the rook was somewhere else, I would have checked him here and taken the pawn. Now, it makes sense to still do the same thing, which I do, but that's why he put his rook there, to capture back. So here, I'm just checking. I want to bring my king out, see the light of day, and after king e4, you start to get a little scared. The king's coming in, or maybe you're going to lose this pawn. And probably the last, most important thing that I was proud of, even though I say proud, at this point, I'm just, trying to beg for a draw when I was actually better before. So it's not something to be too proud of, but I was happy that I had the confidence under a lot of time pressure and against Magnus to play the move d3, because he takes the pawn, and what we get into is theoretical draw. And this was a position that I knew was drawn when I played d3, otherwise I wouldn't have played it. King f6, king g5, and basically I'm going to attack this pawn. And as soon as it gets defended, I'm going to go back, and I'm going to stay on these two squares the entire time. And if the white king starts to get a little ambitious, going the long way, I'm just going to go take these pawns. So the king needs to stay nearby, and my king's going to shuffle here and here. As you can see from this game, the way it played out, white just cannot make progress. Anytime this move happens, I just take it and bring my king to the corner ASAP. So he's going to triangulate, try to go around in circles a little bit. And again, I'm just going to go here, and then back, and then this. So those are the only squares I'm going to stay on. The only squares. And then eventually he has to play g5. And we can see I make it to the corner, and we make a nice little grandmaster draw there, even though I was not a grandmaster at the time, with h7. And obviously that is a stalemate. There's no way for white to win with just an h-pawn as long as my king gets in front of it here. So it ended in a draw. It's the only time I've played Magnus, and I know it's not a classical game, certainly not, but I'm still very proud of the result at the time. I was just a 2400 IM, and super pleased that I got a chance to play Magnus in my chess career, because I think there's a lot of people that can't say the same. I mean, he plays a lot of games with top players, but there are definitely a lot of players in the world who have never played against Magnus and probably never will. So I was happy to get the chance to do so, and even happier that I was able to play, in my opinion, a pretty solid game. Nothing remarkable. There weren't a lot of tactics here, but played a solid game with the black pieces. Actually got an advantage. Played like way too much of a wussy and just wanted to draw, so I gave it all away. And then I nearly, I had heart attacks and flashbacks that I would mess the final draw up, but luckily I held it together. I didn't. Secured the draw. It was a big result for the team at the time, and in a rapid game, I'll definitely take that result against Magnus. So this was my only game I've played against him. Maybe I've played against him online on an anonymous account that I just don't know about. But in terms of a public account, public appearance, this was the only time I played Magnus, and hey, we were able to secure a draw. So there you go. We'll take that. And as you can see here, this is the game saved in the chess.com database. Obviously, my account says GM, just because even when you look at past games, it stays with your current title. So I was an IM at the time, but we've got the GM title there now. But yeah, you can see here 97.1, 97.1. So the accuracy is totally on par. This is like, the most drawish game that you could ever have between two players. They have the same accuracy, best moves, 63, 62. Obviously, I got one extra. Don't mind me. But yeah, as you can see, no inaccuracies, no mistakes, no blunders, no missed wins. I mean, it's just a good game, just a solid game with both players. I definitely had the advantage there, even though I got chess.com telling me neither player ever had an advantage. Relax, all right? I had something, but I quickly gave it away, and Magnus rightfully, gave it to me when he saw me next in person for playing like such a wuss with a good position. But hey, I'll take the draw. 97.1 accuracy apiece. It was a good game, and it's obviously a privilege to play against the world champion in any time control, any format. So it's a really really important game for me, and yeah, just wanted to share that with you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed some of the quick analysis here and maybe some of the background stories, but it was awesome for me to get a chance to play Magnus in my chess career, and I wanted to share that with you guys.